The question we should be asking is not sort of what curriculum should I use, what homeschooling philosophy should I use,
Mhm.
but how can I foster and build the relationships in my home, right?
Welcome to the Homeschool Connections podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Zara, and I'm so glad you're spending some time with me today. New episodes drop every week, so make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're watching on YouTube. All right, mamas, grab your coffee, press play, and let's homeschool together. Today, I'm joined by Bonnie Landry, a veteran homeschooling mom of 7, who's here to talk all about finding your style in homeschooling. With so many approaches from Charlotte Mason to unschooling, it's easy to get confused about which to pick and how to pick a style that serves each child. Today, we'll hear Bonnie's journey and how she discovered the right educational fit for her family. Bonnie, thanks for
I
being here
know.
today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. This is great.
This is wonderful. So you have raised and homeschooled 7 children, all,
Yes.
I am sure, with their own personalities. They've got their own learning styles. How did you approach teaching when each child likely needed something a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that you have to me, education to be sort of whole meant that it was really important that I brought in all the senses, right? Like, so that was really
Mhm.
important to me that we talked, that they talked, that we wrote, that we listened, that that we could just sort of embody all of the things that we could do, a lot of tactile stuff.
Mhm.
So I felt that that was a really important aspect of homeschooling, that as a family, if we can work towards using all the senses as much as possible, then we're going to ideally, capture everybody's attention. When you're working
Mhm.
one-on-one, that's a bit different because you can tailor it to the individual child. But as a whole, you just want to make it as sensory as possible, right?
Mhm.
So all of that, auditory, oral, tactile, we want to kind of bring that all in so that we're kind of addressing the needs of everybody.
I love that. So tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about your kids. I'd love to hear about them. Did you
Yeah.
have, I mean, I can speak from my own personal experience. I've got a child who is active and doesn't want to sit down when he's working
Yeah.
and he wants to be
Yeah.
bopping around. I've got a child who just wants to get his work done. Tell me a little bit about your experience and about your kids during that homeschooling season.
Sure, yeah. So my eldest, so there's almost 20 years between the oldest and youngest. Okay. So my
Mhm.
oldest is almost 39 and my youngest is almost 20. And those two bookend daughters are
Mhm.
are aspects of their personality quite similar. They're both very studious, very academic, very bookish, right?
Mhm.
So that, in a sense, really lends itself to homeschooling as we sort of
Yes.
imagine traditional homeschooling to look,
Yes.
right? So, so that was interesting to kind of have the first and last. So my experience, sort of opening and closing, were quite similar, right? Uh, so I had 3 girls, and then I had 3 boys, and then my daughter. So those 2 bookend daughters, very
Mhm.
bookish. Then I had my other 2 daughters. One of them was very, also very studious, but
Mhm.
more an active person. She was horseback. She loved horseback riding. She had a horse. Much more inclined to just say, I'm going to go out for a walk, or I'm going to go do something outside. But I would say still had the capacity to sit and learn.
Yes.
My second daughter, really active, really physical, the kid who had to do cartwheels while you were reading to her. And I would say, "You're not listening." She said, "That's how I listen." And I thought, "Okay,
She's
that's."
not wrong. It's
Yeah,
true.
exactly. And everything, she had to be busy all the time. So when I was reading to her, she would always be doing something with her fingers, or when she was
Mhm.
younger, big body movements and stuff like that. The boys were all obviously much more active, as boys tend to be.
Yes.
If the boys with the girls, we tried to go outside every day, that was important to us, but with the boys, we absolutely had to go outside every day, and so it
Mhm.
was great. They had we have kind of a big circular paved driveway, which at some point when our boys were young, we thought it was gravel, and we thought we need to pave this because, like, literally between subjects, Mom, can we go, ripstick? Mom, can we go ride our bikes? Mom, can we go play road hockey?
Yes.
And to be able to do that between subjects or between sort of phases in your school day was fantastic because they just had so much capacity to get their physical energy spent so that
Mhm.
when we went to sit down for 20 minutes or half an hour, they were capable of doing that, right? But yeah, a lot
Absolutely.
of energy.
Absolutely. So when you first started homeschooling, did you initially pick a homeschool philosophy that you wanted to follow? And if so, what was it? And
Right.
how did you decide on that method?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I so back in the day, there wasn't a lot available. So I started homeschooling in 1991. There wasn't a lot around. There was no internet.
Mhm.
So the
Things have
discussion of
changed.
homeschool philosophy was more mother to mother,
Mm,
but there wasn't a lot around either, right? So in my what I entered into it with though was that I wanted education to not be about rewards and consequences. That really
mhm.
mattered to me. So the idea that I was going to homeschool for the love of learning for its own sake and not be about, if you finish this, you're going to get this, reward.
Right.
That really mattered to me. And so that was the basis that I was working on. So I was several years into homeschooling before the discussion about homeschooling philosophy really started to gain traction. And I
Yes.
think in that era, also there was a lot of people homeschooling because they wanted strictly just wanted to protect their child from the public system, which that was never
Mhm.
my reason for homeschooling. I thought it would
Mhm.
be a beautiful thing to do, a fun thing to do, really an opportunity to explore the love of learning, um, and to engage my kids, but it was an era of kind of fear. I think a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people fear-based homeschooling, and so
Sure.
philosophy was just not really part of the discussion. So no, I didn't really enter into that. Early on, I read books, the little 3 little books by, Ruth Beechick
Mhm.
called, The 3 R's.
Okay.
Reading, writing, and math. They're now available as one book,
Mhm.
but she really talked a lot about sort of inductive reasoning and learning, really natural learning,
Mm.
and sort of set the stage for me for to really explore natural learning and how that would look as the kids got older, right?
How
So,
special.
so that was a really important book for me to read back in the day. Yeah,
I think it's really nice the way that you describe how homeschooling was back when you started, how it was kind of mom to mom bouncing ideas off each other and really taking a very close look at your children and what they were going to need rather than homeschoolers today. We are really inundated with a lot of social media and a lot of different options
yeah,
and trying to figure out what we want. It can almost distract from what you said about just looking at our kids and what we want. I love what you said about making the five senses the root of everything you do. If you could
yeah,
engage all five senses, then you were going to get something special in there for each child, something that would really
yeah.
make sense for them and apply to them. I love that thinking, Bonnie. I really do. So, when you started out homeschooling and you had that idea, to create a multisensory kind of education for your kids and you kind of just went with what felt right for your family. Did you end up sticking with that ideology? Did you stick with that idea? Or as your children grew, did you see that they had different needs and you had to switch things around? At Franciscan University in Steubenville, students live the truth of the gospel in a vibrant Catholic community that unites faith and reason in every major. 20% of Franciscan students come from a homeschool background. Plus, high school juniors and seniors can earn college credit through Franciscan's dual enrollment. Learn more at franciscan.edu.
I would say, the basic idea of homeschooling absolutely stuck for all our years of homeschooling because it was really functional, right?
Mhm.
And that's how and honestly, that's how I ended up being a speaker, was because I would have groups of moms that knew me say, "Okay, well, why are you not butting heads with your kids? Like, why is this working?" And I didn't really know. Like, I thought, well, I don't know. I don't really know. Maybe it's because I don't use rewards. Maybe it's because I don't really use a lot of curriculum. I don't so I had to really examine what was
Mhm.
going on in my own family, and the first few times I sort of gave a presentation on how we learned, it was a real exploration into why it was working in our family, right? So so that was just a really interesting part of it for me to be
Mhm.
reflective about, okay, why is it working, right? And I think a
Brilliant.
lot of that had to do with sort of our ideas about discipline and rewards and consequences, that was a pretty huge component that if you take pressure out of the situation, you're probably going to have a more successful experience, right? If you take
Mhm.
um, if you don't treat it as though, okay, this behavior has this consequence to it. So I'm sorry, I don't remember the original question. I'm going off on a
That's okay. I'm intrigued right now, and I want you to dive into this a little bit because, like you
yeah,
said, other moms were saying to you, "How do you have a peaceful home? How are your kids you cooperating and you're getting your lessons done?
yeah,
How is this so?"
yeah,
It sounds like you homeschooled with ease, and so I want you to talk a little bit about what you're saying about rewards versus consequence. I know it's so tempting to dare I say, bribe your kids to say, "You know
yeah.
what? If you can
It is
finish this,"
bribery. I mean, with yes,
so
right,
and, frustrated, burnt out moms, especially with big families like yours, it's so easy to give a consequence of like, just to, "You're not getting your work done, you're frustrating me, you're distracting the others, get to your room."
yeah.
How did you do this? What was your idea around consequence and reward?
Yeah, so first of all, we didn't always have a peaceful home, just so you know. But I would say by and large, my kids were very cooperative. Um,
Mhm,
a lot of it was that I just refused to headbutt with them.
mhm,
So if they were to me, the relationship had to come first. If relationship doesn't come first,
mhm,
we got a problem on our hands, right? Right
mhm,
from the right from the starting gate. Um, so for me, what what a lot of that looked like was, okay, we're going to, maybe the child is really getting frustrated. You can feel them ramping up about their math. They're
mhm,
getting upset. They're starting to feel angst about their math. And so my tactic on that was just to step back from it with anything they're frustrated
mhm,
with. 'Cause you know what? It sounds to me like something's going on today. I don't know what it is. Maybe you do know what it is. I think you're really tired. We were up late last night, whatever.
mhm.
But name it, or name what the possibilities. And then, I think it would be better if you just maybe we just had a big snuggle and maybe we'd read
Mhm,
a story. Maybe we should go outside for a little while or whatever. So what I'm doing, so we had family oriented studies that we all did together and our one-on-one. So our one-on-one studies, that would be the tack I would take would be, uh, I think we just need to step back, right?
mhm.
Because this looks like it's going to be really hard for you today. And, how about, we just have a big snuggle, right? And so, snuggling should always come first, right?
It should. I would put a bumper sticker that says that on my car. I believe that's so it's so true for my homeschooling as well.
Yeah. And so, I think that parents think that, okay, well, if you do that, you're going to have kids who just say, and make a fuss so they don't have to do
Mhm.
it today, right? But the reality is that if you really address that they're not feeling up to this right now, I think they try even harder for you. And
Yes.
the comparison I make is that, if your husband walks in the door and you've had a bad day and you immediately snap at him or
Mhm.
you weep at him or whatever you do, um, and he says, "Okay, could you just get on with dinner?" Right? We got to get dinner done. You're going to be
Yep.
so angry,
Yep.
right? And you're probably going to walk away. But if he said,
Mhm.
"Wow, it looks like you've had a really hard day," and he hugs you and he gives you a little neck massage, and he said, "Why don't I do dinner tonight? Why don't you
Mhm.
just take some time?"
Mhm.
Right? We're the next day we're gonna be well, what an awesome husband I have. I really
Yes.
need to when he walks in the door to try to be more cheerful or
Yep.
whatever, right? And because he's so good, he's so awesome. And so I think that that's the stage you're setting, right?
There is no better way to have explained that. That makes perfect sense. For the naysayers who think that being soft and being nurturing with your kids will create less rigor in your homeschool, that explained it so perfectly. And I have to get deep for a second and tell you a fear that I had, Bonnie, and I think that maybe our listeners are going to resonate with this. When I
Right,
decided to homeschool, I had a fear that I would lose my identity as the nurturing, loving mother. And then now I'm the disciplinarian and the teacher, right?
right,
Because you think of a teacher in a classroom and she's the one that's got to get everybody in line and behavior modification. Like, no, you have to do your work. You have to get this done now. And how I went from being this sweet, caring, very loving, affectionate mom to what if now my role changes and I'm a homeschool teacher and I have to change, or in their
really,
eyes, I've changed. But it
yeah,
sounds as if you have created, and I think I have in my home too, the perfect balance where no, mom is the teacher of all things. She was the teacher of using a spoon for the first time or helping them take their first steps. And that can just be a seamless transition into academic
Mhm.
work too. And it doesn't have to be a shift. It sounds like you've done that so beautifully in your home.
It's worked well,
Yeah.
and the interesting thing is that placing connection first is not the enemy of sort of academic success either,
Mhm.
right? Because I think ultimately, you really create an environment where your kids do love to learn, and my kids are all I never had an academic heavy hand at all, and my kids are all
Mhm.
quite academic, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and have all gone off to college or university and, have done really well, and for me, it sort of stepped back and I thought, "Isn't that interesting that I had this very sort of soft approach to academics, and yet, here they are." Doing really well academically, and
Mhm.
I think just having the pressure taken off of it and knowing for them going into it knowing, "You know what? I don't have to be all stressed out about an exam, like, it's just, this is a new
Yeah.
adventure having exams or writing essays for a prof or whatever." So I think that we don't have to look at that as that, okay, well, they're going to be academically, challenged because
Mhm.
of this sort of soft approach relationally, right?
I think you just relieved so much tension off of every homeschooling parent who is listening, Bonnie, because I think it's a very real fear that if we do not push academics, that they will not go on to have a higher education or to pursue academics and maybe won't pursue in, a career that we would be proud of. And you just relieved so much stress from parents. And I think, it really makes sense in a lot of ways. I know high schoolers who are in traditional school right now and the amount of homework they're getting after the school day, they're staying up till all hours. They feel incredible pressure. There is a lot of competition between
Yeah.
their peers, and it takes the fun out of learning. So why
Mhm.
would they wanna get a higher education? They would do it maybe just for social pressure or their parents tell them that they have to, but when you take away the love of learning, there is no intrinsic desire to continue
Yeah.
learning. It sounds like the way that you presented learning in this really organic, fun way to them is what inspired them to actually pursue higher education when they had the choice themselves. It
And lots
certainly
of people
sounds
along
that
the way.
way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's interesting to see them, at college and university, and it's all our 6th and 5th and 6th kids just graduated university, so, we only have 1 left who's actually still in college, and uh we've really encouraged our kids when they've been at school that, they get stressed out, like, "I have all this work to do," like, 'cause it's a big load of work, and I mean, every student,
Mhm.
whether they were at a traditional school or homeschooled, is going to feel 'cause it's very different. High school education is quite different than
Yeah.
college, and so the load is heavier, and to be able to say to them that, kind of carry that forward is like, "Yeah, of course you wanna get good marks, but you're gonna have to
Mhm.
kinda pick and choose the classes that
Mhm.
you're not gonna be able to do all the work of all the classes. It's just too much work, right? You recognize that.
Mhm.
And so, because you need balance in your life, you need to be able to have a social life as well. And, you need
Yeah.
to be able to have nurture your spiritual life as well. But to be able to say, choose the classes you think are going to be the most helpful moving forward and
Mhm.
give those your greatest attention. And if the other ones you want to pass them, but if you don't get
Mm.
an A in every class, that's okay, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah, the
know?
point is not to get the A. It's not.
Mhm.
It's to take away the valuable pieces that we do and carry them with us. I think that's really insightful and very interesting. And I really want to talk to you about something that you mentioned. As a young mom who's embarking on homeschooling myself, and I'm thinking, what philosophy am I going to follow? Am I the unschooler? Am I the Charlotte Mason? Am I classical? What am I going to do here? So much of that decision, it was heavily, I thought about it based on, well, what do I like? What do I want my days to look like? What do I want
Right.
the tone of my home to be, right? What do I want it to be poetry and nature study? Do I want it to be unschooling where we're in the backyard having a great time? Do I want to be a little bit more um rigorous with the book work. So I think a lot of moms will also identify with this that when we're trying to pick a philosophy or a flow for our homeschool, we're thinking about what we would like it to look like. But it
Right.
sounds like you have done a really great job because you maybe were more about this organic, like I said, flow of the day, and you had some children that were, as you put it, bookish. How do you balance those personalities? I know we're talking a little bit about balancing, the boys wanting to get out in the driveway and play and the girls who were more bookish, but what about the way that you saw things and the way you wanted them to be, and then balancing it with the way that your kids needed it to be, maybe a little bit more structured?
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I don't know that I gave an awful lot of thought to what I wanted my day to look like.
Mhm.
Um, this was all just a great experiment. I'd never known anyone who'd homeschooled before, so
Me too. Yep.
right? And so we we just sort of jumped into it, and it just morphed. Like some years were um more, bookish, I guess. Some years were
Mhm.
more uh I would say the
Mhm.
nature study-ish, and some weeks were more like that. So the
Mhm.
bookish people are great because once they can read, they just go do their book stuff, right? Like
Yes.
they can immerse themselves. Um, we tried really hard to sort of have so that our meals, we sat down
Mhm.
together and read. So
Mm.
kids would eat their breakfast and lunch, and I would read to them, and that was a time to sort of have a family study, and that was all our social studies and science was kind of based around the table in that way, because they
Right.
make good family studies.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're having some of that sort of bookish time, discussion time, and then our one-on-one work, depending on the child, sometimes you dive into things a lot more. Like when I would sit with
Mhm.
one-on-one with my kids, we would take turns sitting one on one. And that was always fairly short, but we would do
Mhm.
language, we would do math, and then we would do something uh, depending on what their love was. So, say, for
Mhm.
example, that's when I could really dive into poetry if somebody really loved poetry.
Right.
We always did poetry as a family as well, but if I had a particular kid or I had a couple of kids who were really into art, so then we
Mhm.
would sit and take an art book and kind of look through it, and we had like spot the difference art books and things like that.
Yes.
So I could incorporate that individuation into their one-on-one time,
Mhm.
which was really fun to be able to do that. And even in our dictation lessons, I could, language, I could, say, for example, focus on a science book and use that for
Mhm.
dictation. If I had a kid who's really into geology or really into volcanoes or something like that, I could use that
Mhm.
as my basis for what we chose for dictation, right? So I
Mhm.
had opportunity to kind of do both. Bookish people that's a fun way to go because you can just say, "Here's your stack. Here's
Yes.
everything you wanted. Here's
Yep.
your Christmas present," and, give them the stack of books that they've been, Greek mythology or whatever it is they're into, and
Mhm.
get them a stack of books. So for those kids, you wanna take a little more time to, "Let's get out for a walk every day." It takes a little more,
Yes.
engaging them in what's going on other than the books, right?
Absolutely. I always tell my sons that as we're learning, and, I try to sprinkle in, of course, there's social studies and there's science, there's math, there's reading, there's writing. I always emphasize how important reading is because it's the key that opens the door to learning anything you want, anything you've ever imagined learning about. You can learn about anything if you know how to read and you're a great reader. So I think that's fabulous. Bonnie, so give me a little bit. I've got a pretty good idea of what it looked like in your home. Like you said, science and social studies you did together, which I thought was really beautiful. I think those are two great subjects that really can span a really wide range of ages, and it can be accessible. Like you said, if it's volcanoes, you can be reading about it on an eighth grade level and on a first grade level. I think that's fantastic. You said that you took some time to have individual or small group work, and that was interest led. I love interest led learning. I think that's so important. Tell me a little bit about the flow of your day otherwise. When did you find time for outdoor play and for hobbies? And what were those other kids doing when you were taking the time to have those individual one on one meetings?
Right. Okay. So I would sit down. Everything happened in our kitchen. Just so you know, we had a big
Hmm.
kind of country kitchen.
Yeah.
We had a big table in there, and the kids would, when we were eating and doing the studies that we did around meals, the kids would all be at the table with me. But then I had a little separate area off my kitchen that was, had all my stuff, right? That I
Hmm.
needed to do whatever I did with them, all their math books and their anything we were doing together. And so basically, we would have breakfast together. I would read. We'd have some fun. The older kids would do whatever they could do on their own. Okay, so. Uh, so that has to be they had to be very independent with a subject like music, for example, that they could go off and do it on their own while I was
Mhm,
working with the other kids.
mhm.
So that sit down work with each kid was maybe 20 to 30 minutes, depending on um, the time frame that I was working with, and sometimes it was shorter depending on the age of the child. A 5-year-old, if you get 10 minutes out of them, you're doing great, right?
Yes, yes.
And uh, so often when my kids are older, I would get them to help out with the toddlers while I was doing one-on-one
Mhm,
work, right?
mhm.
And so I would get them each to help for 20 or 30 minutes so that they would sort of take turns, help out with the
Yes.
toddler while I'm working with this child. When they were really young, I just had people crawling all over me all the time. It was just, even though I was working one-on-one with somebody, I was kind of focused on that.
Mhm,
I would always have little kids kind of all around me. However, I think it's really important to note that when your kids are all really small, doing sit down work for 2 or 3 minutes is
mhm.
going to be totally adequate. You don't have to, spend 20 or 30 minutes because that's impossible
Yes.
when all you have is small children. So if you have,
Mm,
a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and you want to do some sit down work with your 5-year-old, if you can get a couple of minutes, that you're creating a habit. Really,
mhm,
that's you're
absolutely.
you're creating virtue, really. And so this is what we do, and so that builds on itself. So I know I've had people say to me, well, I don't have older kids to watch the younger kids while I do sit down work.
Mhm,
Well, the season for that comes,
mhm.
but to be able to have this, a perspective that when your kids are small, it's gonna be really short, right?
Yes. It goes very fast. I remember feeling like I was struggling with that myself. I had a kindergartner, and then my little guy was 3 years younger, and thinking, "Oh, I can't have there's not enough Play-Doh in the entire house to keep him occupied. There are not enough puzzles." But just like that, the snap of a finger, that
Yeah,
season has passed for us, so I
yeah,
completely understand that feeling.
yeah.
Bonnie, I'm very inspired by you, and I think that our listeners are gonna be listening to our conversation, listening to our chat and thinking to themselves, how can I be more like Bonnie? Because
Oh.
you have such an ease about your perspective with homeschooling and the fact that, like I said, it's very interest led. You were very relaxed about giving everybody what they needed. But I really want to hone in on talking about your perspective because I think that's where the magic really is in all of this. Because I think a lot of moms are worried about falling behind. They're worried about keeping up with whatever public school is doing. Maybe they're worried about keeping up with whatever co op is doing. But you had this unique perspective. I can tell that what you were doing was more than enough. What made you feel that way and take on that perspective when I'm sure the other moms that you were friendly with were putting more pressure on themselves?
Yeah, I think there were moms, not everybody. It was interesting because I had, at that time when homeschooling was very new,
Mhm,
I had sort of my Christian friends who
mhm,
tended to be very hard on themselves, very hard on the kids, like very
mhm,
goal-oriented, I guess.
mhm,
Uh, but they were homeschooling for different reasons. And then there was a small group of sort of secular, I would say at the time, kind of new agey homeschoolers, right? Where I
mhm.
live, that was, I live on the West Coast, so things are, it's pretty woohoo around here.
Yes.
So I actually, in terms of, um, sort of parenting philosophy and whatnot, I definitely resonated with the new age people more than I
Mhm,
did with the Christian families.
mhm.
Um, and but there was, so it was difficult because I sort of had my feet in both camps because
Yes.
you just have to make your choices, right? And uh, so yes, how did I get that? I don't know. I think that I just thought I have to, if I'm going to do this, I have to be kind of fearless about it, right? And I have
Mhm,
to not care what other people think,
mm.
including my own family, which was challenging because homeschooling was new and my parents were very wigged out by it. And I had to have some conversations with myself and with them, like, you know what?
Mhm,
It can't matter. These are my kids. And I think as parents, I think our modern era, and especially with all the information overload that we have,
mhm,
it's harder to be confident, right?
mhm.
Just be confident as a parent. And the thing is, God gave you these kids. And I'm sorry, I have something popping up here.
That's okay.
Um, I have God gave you these kids, and And in your marriage, he gave you the ability to raise them, right? And the responsibility of education, whether you choose to outsource it or not, the
Mhm.
responsibility of it is still yours. And so I thought, you know what? I just have to be fearless. I just have to know that the grace is going to come to me and nobody else will raise
Mhm.
these kids. And so you know, whatever, that's whatever your problem you have with what I'm doing or whatever somebody else is doing, I can't care about that. And there was times when that crept in, right, where I would think, "Oh, those kids are doing way more science than I'm doing," or whatever.
Mhm.
And I thought, "You know what? I have to choose to not care about that." So we have to be very intentional about what we care about, right?
Mhm.
And I think that attribute to be able to recognize that early on and to say, you know, Tim, and if that's every day or every hour of your day, that you have to say, "You know what? I can't care about what's going on in somebody else's home. I can
Yep.
only care about what's going on in my home, and I have to be the
Mhm.
best mom I can be," right? And, yeah, so I think that that's helpful to be fearless, right?
I think that is fantastic advice. And we all need the reminder from time to time. It is hard to do exactly what you just said, and we need the reminder. I think you are fantastic, Bonnie. This has all been so
Thank
much fun for me. You've given me a renewed sense of, I don't know what the word is, but a little moxie to just go for it. And
Right.
I just think it's very cool that you didn't know anybody who homeschooled. Maybe your family wasn't completely on board or understanding and of course, like we said, there wasn't the internet and you just went for it. I love that fearlessness. Like you said, you knew grace would meet you where you took this journey, and I'm very intrigued and inspired by your story.
Thank
Before
you.
I let you go today, Bonnie, is there anything left on your heart that you'd want to share with our listeners?
Just I think that if you find you are needing encouragement,
Mhm,
make sure you have a real life community because
mhm.
it's just so important for us to have real flesh and blood people who we can go through life with
Yep.
and you know, bare our hearts to when we're having a hard day or whatever. So have a real life community, really work towards that. Be
Mhm,
gentle with yourself, right?
mhm,
And I think that that's really where we need to find find who we are and what we're doing here. And really, the question we should be asking is not sort of what curriculum should I use, what homeschooling philosophy should I use,
mhm.
but how can I foster and build the relationships in my home, right?
That's beautiful. What
Yeah.
a great note to leave us on. This was fantastic, Bonnie. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so much
being
for
here
having
today.
me. It's great.
Thank you. This isn't the end of the conversation. I want to hear from you. Come say hi on Instagram, connect with me on Facebook, or leave a comment below. I want to know what today's conversation sparked in you. I read and respond to every message. Until next time, remember, you got this.